I want you to open your Bible. I've just shortened up my text a while ago. I want you to just look with me in Matthew chapter 9. Very familiar story. I'm just going to pick up a verse or two to kind of key you in. You remember the story of this woman in Matthew chapter 9. Look at it in verse 20. And behold, a woman which was diseased with an issue of blood 12 years came behind him and touched the hem of his garment. For she said within herself, if I may but touch his garment, I shall be whole. Now I want to say something to you. She knew something happened, and Jesus knew something happened. You read the account over in Mark, and you find out that he knew virtue went out of him. And he asked, who touched me? And the disciples, what do you mean in a crowd like this? Who touched you? Everybody touched me. He meant a special touch. And that was a special moment for that woman. I want to talk to you a little bit tonight on cherish the moment. Cherish the moment. Say, what are you talking about? I'm talking about, like for me tonight, I cherish the moment to come back and renew some memories and see what God is doing. And this is kind of a special time for me. It was a special time for that woman. But there was more to it than the crowd, more to it than the disciples knew anything about. And when the Lord said, who touched me, he knew something special had happened. He knew something really special had happened. And I'll tell you, I won't go into it too deep, but she touched him on the hem of his garment. Now it says in one place touched his clothes, but she touched the hem of his garment. You got to understand something with the Jewish dress. Remember the prayer shawl that went over him? And the long hems and so forth, and the tassels on the bottom of it. She didn't just touch his clothes, she touched the garment. She touched him where the name of God, the secret name of God, was signified on that prayer shawl. You know what I'm speaking about? Remember, the high priest could go only into the Holy of Holies once a year, and only one time was it legal for him to really speak the very name of God. And that name of God, we can call it some big words. It's the tetragrammaton, and it's the one word they're not yet 100% sure. The Jewish rabbis are not exactly how to pronounce it, but it is the secret name of God. Remember when Christ was crucified, what Pilate did? He wrote a sign over the cross in the Hebrew and the Greek and the Latin. And this is the King of the Jews. Remember the priest came to him and said, don't write that up there. Write that he said he was the King of the Jews. You know why they didn't like what he wrote? Because from a distance, those letters, those capital letters, looked like the same Hebrew letters that was representing and speaking the very holy, perfect name of God. If you did it in Hebrew, it'd be Jod He Vah He, and most of us don't know much about that, but from a distance, God had intervened and was saying, yes, you are crucifying God. This is the Son of God. This is the name that the high priest could only legally speak one time a year in the Holy of Holies. And it was a special moment there where God was bringing the witness in. I want to say to you that we've all had some special moments. And I want to say to you, be careful. Don't take them for granted. Cherish them. Amen. Cherish them. Our nation's got some special moments. 9/11 was special. Most of us remember when we were there, where we were at, and so forth. And I remember right after 9/11, do you remember how that you'd see an American flag flying everywhere? On top of the buildings, even on the cranes that was working, somebody'd go way up there and put an American flag. And patriotism was running high for a while. I wish it was still running that high. And there was a great spirit. There was a great spirit going on. America's had those moments we ought to cherish in our history. We go back, we talk about 1776. A lot of folks forget, but in 1812 we had another war with England. Remember that? No, I wasn't there. Some of the kids may think so, but I wasn't there. But I have read about it. And it was a time God intervened as much in 1812 as he did in 1776. And if you study it a little bit, you'll find where the boats from England came over and the armies unloaded, and they literally went into Washington, and literally the president had to escape for his life on horseback. And they had hit by surprise, and it looked like they were going to take the whole place. And then something special happened. God intervened. And the weather all of a sudden went crazy. Tornadoes hit, storms hit. The big cannons that the English had unloaded off the boat, they said the tornadoes picked them up. And the floods happened. And all of a sudden it was like God said no and turned them around. You ought to study that. It's a phenomenon that happened. It was of God, of course. And as I think about that today, our nation's had those moments we ought to cherish above all others. Yet today we've slipped so much, and I can't open that can of worms. All kind of crazy stuff today. Crazy stuff. Unbelievable. The president's always under attack, and he's human. He messes up like I do and others. But the truth is he's done some good things too. I thank God that less babies are being killed under his administration. I thank God that he stopped the transgender surgery being paid for with our tax dollars in the military. I thank God he recognized Israel and put the embassy over there where it belongs. I can go down the list. And yet today we ought to cherish some of those moments. And I fear we may lose them quicker than we think. But I want to say to you, there's moments we ought to cherish in our nation. There's moments we ought to cherish in our family. Oh, listen, family moments. Any of you, now you might want to get a little older than some of you are, but as old as I am, I'd love to run the clock back. I've had this thought, what would heaven be if I could design it? I might go right back through life and pick some spots and just put them all together, and that'd be heaven to me. When the baby came into the bedroom early in the morning and got in the bed with mom and dad. That's precious. You ever think about that? Precious moments. Precious moments. I was in the living room. We only had one baby, and he was a miracle, but he's given us 4 now, so we got 4 grandkids. And when they were just at that lovable age, before they became teenagers, but anyway, I'm joking now, but at that lovable age, we were all in the room. It was, I think it was a Sunday afternoon. We'd eaten lunch together after church, and I don't know if it was a car race or a football game or something was on the news or whatever it was, the TV was going, and everybody was around it, and all of a sudden something caught my attention, and I said, "Shh, everybody be quiet." And my wife looked at me like only a wife can look at her husband. And she looked at me, and I knew I'd done wrong. She said, "Cherish the moment." What she was saying, there's no news on that TV. There's no ball game. There's no car race. There's nothing as precious as what's going on right now in this family with these kids. And she was right. I want to say to you, we let some of those moments slip. We take them for granted. We like to recall them sometime, but we can't. You know, sometimes when you had a moment, you can't hardly explain it, when you just connected with family. Many of you know when I was preaching to the college chapel this morning, telling them my testimony concerning God saved me out of race carring and racing cars on the track and stuff, way back. The wheels were not totally square then, but it was way back. And I had gotten saved. This girl wouldn't go with me anywhere but church when I asked her for a date. 4 times I went to church with her before I got saved. Never had heard the gospel before. Oh, by the way, I'm still going to church with her. 61 years we've been married. We're still going to church, amen. But with all that said, I'd ask her to marry me. I hadn't told my family, not my brother, not my dad. I don't know, a little shyness, a little something. And my dad and my brother was helping me take the car to the racetrack, and the extra truck and all that had to be driven, all that kind of stuff in that day. And So on the way that night to the racetrack, I said, if I win the race tonight, I'm going to buy both of y'all a new suit so you'd go to my wedding. That was the way I was telling them I was getting married. And they kind of smiled. And see, I was pretty sure of the race. I should have won that race that night. I mean, I really should have. I had the fastest car. I had a good starting position. There was no reason I shouldn't have won that race. But on the last lap, I got careless. And a guy passed me and beat me to the finish line. Oh, it run my world that night. I just crushed my soul. We got back in the truck. Brother Wilkerson started home. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to smile. I was sick. Nobody said anything, just a dark cloud. My brother sitting there, my dad sitting there. I lost the race. Couldn't blame nobody, just me. I lost the race. We're going down the road, and finally my brother looked over at my dad, and he said, well, there goes our suit. Now, that don't mean nothing to you, but to me, it was just a connection. It was just and we laughed, and it was okay, and all that. And see, I still remember that after 100 years. I'm just saying to you, there's some moments that I wish sometimes you could just punch a button. And I thought when I get to heaven, if God says, what do you want to do, Mickey? I'm going to say, punch that button. Let me see that again. Let me feel that again. Let me have that joy I had for just a connection time there. Family moments. Maybe it is the kid getting in bed early with you in the morning. Maybe it's a wedding. Maybe it's a graduation. I don't know what it might be. It was a precious moment. My wife and I had been married 15 years. No babies. We serving the Lord. We were faithful in church. I was a deacon. I was a youth leader. But no babies. My wife wanted a baby, probably more than I did. You know, men don't quite think the same way. I took a country church and pastored it for 3 years. And she went to a country doctor there. She'd gone uptown doctors and all that. Even had a little bit of work done in the hospital. But all the doctors said, you can't have a baby. You can't have a baby. So you better adopt one. So we started trying to adopt one. But we were not very financially able, and pastored a little country church. And then God moved me from the little country church to the little city church where I'm at now. But the little city church was smaller than the little country church. No guarantee of a salary. And I went to work hard as I could, trying to win everybody and get the job done. And I kind of forgot about adopting a baby. Hadn't thought much about it. After we'd been there a couple of weeks, I was up on the Sunday school building repairing the roof with a couple of the men. And I saw my wife pull up in the parking lot in the car, and she just sat there. Now, you women ought not do this to us husbands. But here's what she just sat there. Well, I hollered at one of the kids on the ground. I said, James, go over and see what my wife wants. So he went over and stuck his head in the car door, and he come back and he said, Preacher! She said she wouldn't tell nobody but you. I thought, uh-oh, some problem. I come down the ladder. I went and stuck my head in the car window. And this is what you ought not do to us. Cry and laugh at the same time. We don't know how to figure that out. I still haven't figured that out, how you can do it. But that's what she was doing. Tears coming and she laughing. I said, what in the world? Backed up, looked at the car, said, you wrecked the car? She said, I just got back from the doctor. I had no idea she was going to a doctor. And he said, we're going to have a baby. I said, go home and go to bed. I didn't know what else to say. And I made her. I made her go home to go to bed right then. Because I remember those doctors said you can't have one. Well, he's 44 or 5 years old now. And he's got me 4 grandkids, and he's pastoring up in the hills of West Virginia. And the doctors were wrong. They were wrong. That was a precious moment to me. A precious moment. I mean, really, really special. Our country church had been praying with my wife. I didn't know much about it. They'd been praying with her for her to have a baby. See, women understand women a little better. Did anybody know what an old-fashioned quilting bee is? When they would hang a rack from the ceiling, and it would have material, and the ladies would sit around that thing, and they'd crochet, sew, whatever they did, these little squares into a quilt. Remember that? Well, these ladies at my country church had done that. And it was a prayer quilt. And it had like butterfly squares and things on it. And each one of them would have their name on the square. I didn't know anything about that much. But when we left that little country church to come to where I have been now for 49 years, they gave my wife this prayer quilt. The prayer was that she could get pregnant, even though the doctor said she couldn't. Well, she got pregnant. The baby was born. And on the foot of his bed, when I would go in to wake him up in the morning, was always that quilt. It always lay there. It was a testimony to what God could do. All as he come up through elementary school, even into junior high, I'd go in that bedroom, get him ready for school, and that quilt was always there. It was always a reminder to me what God can do no matter what man says. Precious moments, personal moments. Time would allow, I could tell you a number of other things. I've seen God answer so many prayers and do so many things and be such a blessing. I was pastoring that country church, and I'm talking about cherishing some moments. And Brother Wilkinson, it was out in the woods. It was way back. It wasn't the jumping off place, but you could see the jumping off place from there. It was way back. But God blessed, and we saw a lot of souls saved, and yet I was a young preacher, and I was chomping the bits to get the job done, you know. And then all of a sudden, God laid on my heart, your work's finished here. An older pastor could do what you're doing here, and you ought to go somewhere. I didn't know. God got a hold of me about that. And I said, no, I'm happy here. I mean, I thought I was, and I was. But one Sunday morning, I got up to preach, and only a preacher can understand this. I was as prepared as ever. I had read my Bible as much as ever. But when I got up in the pulpit that Sunday morning, it didn't work. It wasn't coming out right. Nobody seemed to notice but me. I felt like God had left me. Scared me bad. I said, I'm lecturing, I'm not preaching. Scared me. I was so scared that night when I come back, I didn't try to preach. Now, I'm out there where there's no visiting preacher coming by. I'm out there where you by yourself. And I walked in there that night, and I was scared to get in the pulpit. I was afraid God had left me. I was scared. And I just took the Roman road, and I called up a few teenagers I had and set them on the platform, and we practiced soul winning in front of the crowd. I was scared to preach. I was scared. I said something's wrong. There, I went home that night, and I prayed, and I prayed, and I prayed, and I stayed up in the office. Now, see, what had happened was, the little church where I'm at now, I had preached a revival for them. They had 22 in Sunday school when I preached that week. We had 22 saved that week. We had 44 the next Sunday. It worked. The figures just worked. And the preacher had left, and that little church was trying to call me to be the pastor. And I was telling them, no, that's my hometown. I'd be a prophet in my own country. I can't go back where I shot the street lights out at night with my .22 rifle. I can't go back there. They still got my fingerprints for speeding down there at City Hall. I can't go back there and say I'm a preacher. I argued with God big over that, so I wasn't going. And then that Sunday morning in my country church, God just left me. I couldn't preach. Scared me bad. So that night I just tried to get by without preaching. I went home and I started praying. I prayed a long time. I was arguing with God, really. Lord, if I've got to go to my hometown, to that little old church down there, Lord, you wouldn't do me that way. And that's the way I spent the night. And one of the deacons down there, he'd called me a time or two. His name was Sam. He had gotten saved in that little revival. Now you got to know something about Sam. Sam was a flagman on the racetrack when I was driving my race cars. That's why he came to church that night. See if God could really make a preacher out of me. And he got saved. And of all things, that preacher was desperate and he made him a deacon and left. So he's calling me to come be the pastor. I said, Sam, don't you call me no more. Don't let nobody else call me no more. I'm not going to that church, Sam. That's my hometown. I can't go there. So time went on. Several weeks went on. And then that day scared me so bad when I couldn't preach. But I told God as I finished praying that night, I really thought I had backed God in a corner. I said, Lord, I've told that church not to call me anymore. But if you are in this, they'll call me one more time. I thought, well, I painted God in a corner. I'll go and go to sleep. You don't do that, folks. The next morning I got up. Hospital was 25 miles away in Leesburg, Florida. Had a member in there sick. I went over to see her. By the time I got back home and sat down at the table to eat a little sandwich, just my wife and I, of course, then no baby. And the phone was hanging on the wall in the kitchen, and it rang. And I got up and turned my back to my wife, answered the phone, and the first words I heard was, Brother Mickey, this is Brother Sam. Don't get mad at me. I'm not supposed to call you anymore, but God told me to call you one more time. I've been in the restroom praying, eating my lunch in the restroom, and he said, call you one more time. Man, with my back turned to my wife, I said, okay, Brother Sam, tell the church on Wednesday night I'll come talk to them about it. And then I turned around and looked at my wife. Precious moment. I hadn't said a word to her. I looked at her. She'd said also, we're not going back there. Tears was running out of both eyes, and here's what she said. She said, I told God last night if we had to go, I was willing to go. Well, I've been there 49 years, fixing to start 50. Somebody says, when are you going to leave that place? When I get another phone call from God.